What you're about to hear isn't just another heated exchange in Congress. It's a window into how decisions about war, money, and accountability are actually handled at the highest levels of government.
As a gentleman from California, Mr. Khanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, tomorrow is 2 months since the war has begun. You've testified that it was $25 billion in cost in terms of the munitions we used and what we paid for it. But when you add to that the damage that was done to our bases and today's dollars for buying replacement munitions and replacement aircrafts, what has the total cost been over the last 60 days?
That number right now reflects the total cost that we're seeing.
Including buying in today's dollars the new weapons and replacements and including the damage there? That's your testimony?
If there's adjustments to that, I would defer to the comptroller on that.
And how much are you seeing in terms of, are you asking in terms of supplemental funding just for the Iran mission from this committee?
If and when a supplemental is submitted, the majority of it would not just be for,
what would be the ballpark for Iran?
Munitions related to the entirety of what we want to get done.
A number, what would you submit?
It would be within on Iran, it would be less than $25 billion, but there's a lot more we would ask for beyond just Iran.
You're saying it's $25 billion. Okay, I would just, if you come back and you want to revise those numbers, because all the experts are disagreeing with you when it comes to today's dollars and damage, but you can revise it. How much did it cost American taxpayers in terms of the strike to the Iranian school where kids were killed? Do you have that number? In terms of the missiles we used?
As I've said, that unfortunate situation remains under investigation.
You don't know how much it cost the taxpayer?
But I wouldn't tie a cost to that, to anything.
It's a reasonable question, no, sir? I mean, our taxpayer money was going there. Do you know how much it will cost Americans in terms of their increased cost in gas and food over the next year because of the Iran war?
I would simply ask you what the cost is of an Iranian nuclear bomb.
I'm going to give you that opportunity.
I would simply ask you what you're playing gotcha questions about domestic things. I'm not.
You're saying it's a gotcha question to ask what it's going to be in terms of the increased cost of gas.
Why won't you answer what it costs to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb?
I give you that, sir. But let me.
What would it cost? What would you pay to ensure Iran doesn't get a nuclear bomb? What would you pay?
I reclaim my time. Do you not know? You had no one do the analysis of what the increased cost of gas and food on the American people are going to be?
What is the cost of Iran holding that straight at issue with nuclear weapons?
It's $631 billion, which means it's an increase of $5,000 a year for American households. Now, let me give you this point. You're saying that your operation is preventing a nuclear Iran. Will you acknowledge that there is an economic cost to the American people for doing what you believe is necessary to make Iran denuclear? Will you acknowledge the economic cost?
We have an incredible economic team that's managing this better than what the previous administration did to our economy, what the previous administration did for deflation,
you know what's upsetting?
I reclaim my time. COVID, and you're going to lecture this administration about the economy?
You know what is upsetting?
Incredible.
You didn't even do the analysis on how much it's costing the American people. It's one thing if you said, okay, it cost the American people $5,000, but we think it's worth it. That's what we've done in World War II and other wars. Here's what it costs. You got to pay for it. You don't even know what the average American is paying. You don't know what we paid in terms of the missiles that hit the Iranian school. You don't know what we're paying in terms of gas. You don't know what we're paying in terms of food. Your $25 billion number is totally off. It's the incompetence. It's the incompetence. Let me ask you this. Certainly, maybe here we'll find agreement. There were still 440 pounds of low-enriched uranium, correct, when President Obama after the JCPOA? Is that accurate?
The amounts and types are classified.
Okay. Will you acknowledge that there were 970 pounds of uranium enriched after Trump tore up the JCPOA?
The JCPOA was a terrible deal that allowed Iran a path to a nuclear bomb.
You deal with vague platitudes. I'm asking you about numbers. Like you don't know what gas costs, you don't know what food costs, you don't know what the operation costs. You know, I get sound bites, but how about numbers? Do you know how much the enriched uranium was after you ripped up the JCPOA? Trump did.
I'll give you a number. I know that, as was stated by early on, the price of gas is twice as expensive in California, your home state, as anywhere else in the country because of the horrible policies your state pursued.
You know what? It used to be that type of stuff worked. And then you started to lose the people that you campaigned you wanted to be for, because you said you wouldn't get us into bad wars. You said you would bring down the prices. You know what I'm sad for? I'm sad for all the people who voted for Trump. I'm sad for them because you betrayed them. You betrayed a lot of that MAGA base. And you know who knows that? J.D. Vance knows that.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon.
In this tense back and forth, Representative Khanna presses Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on a basic but critical question. What is this war really costing the American people? Not just in abstract national security terms, but in dollars, taxpayer dollars, household costs, and long-term economic impact. What stands out immediately is the disconnect. Khanna is asking for concrete numbers, total war costs, damage to military assets, the price of munitions, even the downstream effects on gas and food prices. These are not trivial details. They're the foundation of democratic oversight. In any functioning system, elected officials are supposed to evaluate whether a war is worth its cost. But that requires transparency. Instead, what he gets are broad talking points and deflections. When asked about the total financial impact, the answers stay vague. When pressed about the cost of a strike that reportedly killed children, there's no acknowledgement of financial or moral accountability, just a reference to an ongoing investigation. And when the conversation turns to how the war affects everyday Americans, higher fuel costs, rising food prices, the response shifts away from data and toward rhetoric about national security threats. This moment reveals something deeper than just a disagreement. It highlights a pattern where the justification for military action leans heavily on fear, what it might cost if nothing is done, while avoiding clarity about what is already being spent and who is bearing that burden. Khanna's argument isn't that security threats aren't real. It's that leadership should be honest about trade-offs. Historically, Americans have supported difficult wars when leaders clearly laid out the costs. What's different here is the apparent absence of that transparency. Another key tension is competence versus messaging. Khanna repeatedly points out that without hard numbers, it becomes impossible for Congress, or the public, to make informed decisions. If leadership cannot quantify the economic impact of a war, it raises serious questions about planning and accountability. The exchange escalates because it's no longer just about policy. It's about trust. By the end, the frustration boils over into a broader political critique that promises made to voters about avoiding costly wars and lowering economic pressure are not aligning with reality. Whether you agree with that conclusion or not, the exchange forces a critical question: are decisions being made with full transparency, or are Americans being asked to accept costs they're not even being told about? This is why moments like this matter. They're not just political theater. They shape how public money is spent and how much oversight exists over decisions that affect millions of lives. If you think leaders should clearly explain the real cost of war, not just the strategy, but the price tag, then this is a conversation worth paying attention to.